Evening, everybody, and welcome to Story Hour. I am your host, Daniel Marcus. My unparalleled co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you are all safe and healthy, taking care of yourselves and each other in times that remain deeply weird, even though we're kind of out of the main throes of the pandemic. I started Story Hour in early pandemic days with the intention of just providing a place where me and my writer friends could read our work to each other. And I was really thinking this kind of small, cozy community, and it has just blown way, way, way past that, in large part to my partnership with Laura. And so we've been at it for 2.5 years, every week, week in and week out. We've had some amazing authors in these little virtual rooms. The way it works is this: it's what I think as a time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling each other lies. So every week we have two authors, about 30 minutes each, doing exactly that. Tonight we're very happy to have Holly Wade Matter and Wole Talabi. Special shout out to Holly, who was my Clarion West partner in crime, not all that long ago, but a while back. So it is our custom to ask authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. If you're fortunate enough to be in a position to help financially, do that. Otherwise, just be aware, spread the word, and just take note. So Holly is reading tonight for the University District Food Bank. That's udistrictfoodbank.org. For nearly 40 years, University District Food Bank has helped prevent hunger in Northeast Seattle neighborhoods. Each week, more than 1,300 different families receive the groceries they need to prepare nutritionally balanced meals at home. Last year, they had 58,000 customer visits and distributed over 2.4 million pounds of food. Pretty remarkable. So that's udistrictfoodbank.org. Wole is reading tonight for the African Speculative Fiction Society, africansfs.com. The African Speculative Fiction Society is an informal organization of African writers, editors, comic and graphic artists, filmmakers in the fields of speculative fiction, fantasy, science fiction, stories that draw on traditions, horror, and philosophical fiction. The ASFS provides a place where writers, readers, and scholars can come together to find information, connect with each other, and act as watchdogs for their collective interests. So that is, once again, africansfs.com. So we're going to start the program tonight with Holly. Holly Wade Matters short fiction has appeared in Asimov's Century, Black Cat Weekly, and the Bending the Landscape anthology series. She was twice awarded literary funding from the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, and she also received a creative writing fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. Her first novel, Damned Pretty Things, great title, is out from Aqueduct Press. She lives in Seattle with her husband, Brad, and a sassy house rabbit. What other kinds of house rabbits are there? So, Holly, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Daniel. My trigger warnings are for bullying, character death, and rats. This story is called Mr. Pacifaker's House. Sarcastic talking horse said, "What happened in there?" I remember lying on a black bed in a vermilion room, staring up at the ceiling. A white ceiling, only it was shadowed so that it really looked gray. Overcast gray, the way the sky looks on a 96 degrees Fahrenheit day just before a storm, when the wind's so fierce the clouds rush at you. They rush down at you from the sky, and they tear and they show the black beneath them, above them, inside them. I remember a brass ceiling fan with dark wooden blades. It spun so fast that the blades looked like they were going backwards. "I do that sometimes," said Sarcastic Talking Horse. I remember being so hot that I couldn't even move, so hot that I had to squint to keep the sweat from pouring into my eyes. And I remember scissors. Scissors. Fingernail scissors. They hung from the ceiling by fine gray threads. They swayed in the wind from the fan. There were so many of them, not millions, but surely thousands. I was supposed to count them, each of those thousands of swaying scissors. Did you do it? Said sarcastic talking horse. No. Did you die? Yes. Mr. Pacifiker was a fairy. He told her so himself early on in their acquaintance. Garnet Manon Valentine, then 8 years old, was surprised. She'd assumed all fairies were tiny ladies just like Tinkerbell. Mr. Pacifiker was regular grown-up size, and he was a man, and an old man at that. But she had been raised to be polite to all adult creatures, so she didn't question him. Eventually, she accepted his statement as truth. After all, he didn't behave like regular adults. Garnet Manon used to visit Mr. Pacifiker when her mother didn't know. She would say she was walking down to the library, but instead she'd duck into Mr. Pacifiker's scrubby yard, where he'd be half in, half out of his primer gray 1952 Ford pickup, talking to his horse, a ribsy chestnut gelding without a name. Mr. Pacifiker's horse was tethered to the fender because Mr. Pacifiker didn't have a fence. He never rode his horse. He never drove his truck. Mr. Pacifiker seemed constantly poised to climb into the cab, constantly remembering something he'd left in his peeled paint house that he needed to bring with him. Always teetering on the brink of departure was Mr. Pacifiker, always in between. Garnet Manon would climb into the passenger side of the cab and talk to him there. I'm going to leave you that house when I die, he'd tell her. The First Presbyterian Church wants it, or the lot rather, so they can expand their fellowship hall. They say my house is full of rats and my yard is full of manure, and they're right. I'm going to leave you the rats and the manure as well. I'm going to leave you the horse and the truck and everything I got, Garnet Manon, because you've been so nice to this old fairy everybody else hates. But you got to promise me to stay away from them boys. I do stay away from them boys. She'd rather have said, them boys stay away from me. Even at 8 years, she knew the pain of exclusion. During boys chase girls at recess, she found herself running in circles and shouting, unnoticed, unchased, and alone. Good, keep staying away. They're trouble, that's all, and I don't want no trouble in my house, even if I'm too dead to know about it. Garnet Manon pictured boys running through Mr. Pacifiker's house, breaking the windows and frightening the rats. I will, she promised. What happened then, said sarcastic talking horse. Then, she said, the room went black and cold and totally silent, except that I didn't have eyes to see the blackness, or a body to feel the cold, or ears to hear the silence. I floated like a thought in the back of somebody's mind, halfway between expression and oblivion. I knew that if the somebody forgot me, I'd be gone forever, but I was afraid that they'd speak me because I didn't know how I'd come out. Then there came a blinding light, like a bright headlight on a wet blacktop road on a night when clouds smother the sky. It sped toward me faster than anything imaginable. I couldn't move. I didn't have time. It collided with me and I came out the other side with a scream that split me in two and fused me back together in a single heartbeat. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the vermilion room on the black bed. The air was still hot, hotter than before, and the fan still spun it around the room. But each of the thousands of scissors had disappeared. Garnet Manon had a spiral-bound notebook that she kept between her mattress and her box spring. She had a special pen that spun smoothly across the pages, leaving perfect black words behind it. She used this pen to fill this notebook with speculations about Mr. Pacifiker's life, his house, and his horse. Mr. Pacifiker had never invited her into his house, so there was nothing to contradict her fantasy. She imagined rooms larger than the house itself, paved in marble tiles of black and white and rose and green. She imagined a reflecting pool beneath a faceted crystal dome, the water shot full of prismatic sparks and darting silver serpents. She imagined arches and columns, spiral staircases, draperies of velvet and samite and silk. She imagined doors no higher than her waist that opened into broad and secret chambers. She imagined a half-moon balcony suspended over an abyss, where she would lean over the railing, picking pearls from a silver bowl, holding them between thumb and forefinger, dropping them into the abyss, listening, yet never hearing them bounce and skitter against the bottom because there was no bottom at all. She imagined Mr. Pacifiker, the old fairy, as a mad builder, adding wings and chambers and secret passageways for her eventual delight. She imagined him storing his treasures there for her, arranging and draping and sequestering them in such a way that only she could find them. And since at that time she devoured every fantasy novel she could lay her hands on, she imagined that Mr. Pacifiker's horse could talk, and that it was, as all talking horses, invariably sarcastic. She imagined that it would be her companion, carrying her through the ballrooms and chambers, up and down the stairs, and that it would watch after her and protect her after Mr. Pacifiker had journeyed to fairy heaven. If wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. If horses were wishes, then Mr. Pacifiker was saving his for her. He let his wish graze on the seared grass in his yard, let it display its ribs to the town so that nobody would envy it, want to steal it. As he let the paint peel and flake away from his house, as he let the porch sag, as he let the rats run and play. At 13, Garnet Manon understood disguises. She knew that heroines arose from unlikely origins, were scorned by their peers, and driven to free and reveal their true natures. She knew that she too was disguised. She'd figured out what kind of fairy Mr. Pacifiker really was, but she pretended that she hadn't. She pretended that he really was the magic kind, and that he'd cast a disguising spell over her to keep her safe from them boys. She pretended that the spell was benevolent and would break as soon as the right boy came along. She pretended that Mr. Pacifiker would know the right boy when he saw him. How else could she bear the acne that turned her face into a moonscape? How else could she stand her painful mouthful of braces? How else could she reconcile her name, Garnet Manon Valentine, a heroine's name, with the reflection of herself in the mirror and in the sneering faked love words them boys yelled out at her to make her slouch and cry? You stay away from them boys, Mr. Pacifiker warned her. Don't you listen to their talk. They got one thing on their minds, and once they do it to you, they'll drop you like a hot potato, and then where the hell will you be? Garnet Manon slouched down on the seat, her knees pressed up against the dashboard. Nobody wants to do it to me, she muttered. Ha, said Mr. Pacifiker, that's what you think. Then I got up off the bed, she said, and I walked out of the room and into the awful, filthy, falling apart kitchen. He never let me in there, said sarcastic Talking Horse, so don't blame me. I wasn't. Anyway, there was Mr. Pacifiker, just as alive as you please, sitting on the counter between two stacks of dirty dishes. He didn't look any younger, but he seemed healthy and kind of shiny. A pair of delicate, iridescent wings grew from his back, and they fanned the air and made it cool and sweet. Don't gawk at me, he said. I wouldn't look like this if you weren't so goddamn literal-minded. Garnet Manon dreamed of French-Canadian waltzes spiraling her across a ballroom floor. She had only heard one in her life when she was 13 years old. a duet of hammer dulcimer and folk guitar performed at the county fair. She had found it more opulent than all the arts and crafts in the exhibition hall. She'd packed it and taken it with her into adulthood, though she remembered it not as music, but as movement. The movement of the guitarist's hands as he picked and strummed, the movement of the dulcimer player's wrists as she lightly, rapidly hammered the strings, the movement of her own body, constricted by adolescent shyness. The energy of the music was stored in her body, tensed for release, as though every muscle and tendon were a rubber band pulled to nearly the breaking point. She imagined defloration as thousands of tiny scissors snipping through each rubber band. Orgasm as the sharp snap, a volley of little stings that burned and throbbed against the skin. Defloration was Mr. Pacifiker's word. Orgasm belonged to Cosmopolitan. Both gave her contradictory advice. By the time she was 18, Garnet Manon had had it with Mr. Pacifiker's warnings against them boys. She figured he might as well warn her against being trampled to death by a woolly mammoth. She no longer pretended that he was any other kind of fairy than what he was. She no longer believed in benevolent spells. "Look at me," she said, slouched in the cab of his pickup. "Just you look at me and tell me what the hell kind of boy would want anything to do with me. I'm ugly, Mr. Pacifiker. I'm as ugly as your house and your yard and your horse put together." Mr. Pacifiker, leaning half in, half out of the cab, winced and shook his head. "You're seeing all wrong, girl." "Ha," she said angrily, "me and all the rest of the world. Them boys laugh at me. They make fun of me. They say, 'You're so beautiful, Garnet Manon. I love you, Garnet Manon.' They want me to believe it so they can laugh at me even more. I'm a joke, Mr. Pacifiker, not an object of desire." "Didn't I tell you to stay away from them boys?" Mr. Pacifiker shouted. "Didn't I tell you they only wanted one thing? And here you ignore me completely and let them just deflower you like that." "Nobody's deflowered me, Mr. Pacifiker," Garnet Manon screamed. "Nobody wants to deflower me. Don't you understand anything?" "They done it to you," Mr. Pacifiker muttered, shaking his head. Garnet Manon shrieked in frustration and punched open the passenger door. "You know what, Mr. Pacifiker? I finally got you figured out. And you know what I conclude about you? I conclude that all your life you've waited for them boys to come along, to talk sweet to you, to seduce you and deflower you. But you know what? They never have and they never will. And that's why you won't leave me alone about it. If you can hope for me, you can hope for yourself too. But the truth is, you and I are every bit as ugly as we look, and every bit as ridiculous, and every bit as lonely. The only difference between us, aside from gender, is that you're going to die a virgin a lot sooner than I am, and that's the damn truth." Mr. Pacifiker's body seemed to sag and shrink. His face aged before her eyes, as his own eyes filled with tears. He breathed hard for a long moment, and then he said, "Garnet Manon, I don't care if you've seen it. I don't care if you know it. But did you really have to say it?" Garnet Manon never went to see him again. They never made up. And so when Mr. Pacifiker died, Garnet Manon was surprised to find out that he'd left her the house, horse, and yard in his will, witnessed, signed, and legal. His lawyer brought her the deed and the front door key. Representatives from the First Presbyterian Church came hot on the lawyer's heels, offering a low sum they figured an 18-year-old would be dumb enough to take. Garnet Manon said she'd think about it. "You can't live there," her mother said. "That house is, by all accounts, full of filth and rats." "I don't want to live there," said Garnet Manon. "Just think, if you sold it to the Presbyterians, you'd be able to go to college," said her mother. "I don't want to go to college," said Garnet Manon. "Then what do you want?" her mother demanded. "I want to apologize to Mr. Pacifiker." When a man from the slaughterhouse came inquiring after the horse, Garnet Manon slammed the door in his face, ran up to her room, and wept. She walked down to Mr. Pacifiker's house that evening. She pulled 2 flakes of hay from the bale in the back of the pickup, shook them out for the horse, and patted its ribs as it ate. She wondered if the horse missed its daily conversations with Mr. Pacifiker. She wondered how on earth it had outlived him. It had been an old horse 10 years ago. "Don't worry," she told it. "I won't let the slaughterhouse have you." She fingered the key in her pocket, learned its peaks and depressions, wondered if it were a token of forgiveness, an indication that Mr. Pacifiker hadn't had time to change his will, or simply a poke in the eye to the Presbyterians. She thought of the spiral-bound notebooks she'd filled as an adolescent, investing the house with all the beauties and grace she'd wished for herself, investing Mr. Pacifiker with a power he'd never had, investing the bitten, scrawny horse with nobility and wit. If the inside of the house were really dreadful, she didn't want to have to see it. She didn't want to know the fullness of the squalor he'd lived in. She'd named his tragedy once, and it had killed him, as good as killed him. Nothing was disguised. Everything was real. Them boys would never come. "I'm going in," she said to the horse. "If I fall through the floor, will you let somebody know?" She fitted the key into the lock and turned it. She pushed against the door, lightly at first, then pressing her weight against it until it screamed open and she staggered inside. She stumbled over a bundle of molding newspapers and caught herself on an ancient television set, which groaned and collapsed. In the dim light filtered by grimy windows, she saw fat, scurrying things on the floor, the coffee table, the exploded couch. Glowing white fungus crept up the stained wallpaper. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. "Oh, Mr. Pacifiker," she said sorrowfully. The bathroom, the kitchen were just as bad. All around the house lay the debris of a man who cared only for the life in his head. Had them boys ever come to see him, he couldn't possibly have let them in. One room remained unexplored. The bedroom, it must be, just off the kitchen, behind a closed door. She opened the door and found the beauty in the core of the house, in the core of Mr. Pacifiker, the soaring vermilion chamber disguised by the squalor that surrounded it. I said, "I'm sorry I killed you, Mr. Pacifiker." And he said, "I'm sorry you're so goddamn egotistical. But didn't I break your heart and kill you?" "No, I died of tetanus, just like it said in the paper." She sighed and leaned her head against sarcastic talking horse's neck. So I asked him about the room, and he told me to mind my own goddamn business. And I asked him about fairy heaven, and he said, what did I care? I was never going to get there. And I was about to walk out, and he told me to wait. And he chewed over his words. And then he said, "Garnet Manon, there's bliss. There's bliss you can't even guess at. It's something you give yourself, something you carry around with you, and nobody can take it away unless you let them. You let them boys deflower you. You let them take away your bliss. And that's what I've been warning you against all these years. And if you weren't so goddamn literal-minded, you'd have figured it out years ago." "So what do I do now?" I said. "Take back your bliss," he said, "and keep it safe to your heart. You died in that room, Garnet Manon. You died and you came back whole and free. Not many people get that chance. Don't let it go to waste." And then he went all cranky on me again and said, "I'd advise you to sell the house to them Presbyterians. Make them give you twice what they offered this afternoon. Fart out the truck, then take that horse and go. This town had nothing for me and it's got nothing for you either." "But your house, your room." He waved his hand and snorted. "I don't need that no more, Garnet Manon. I got a better place now." "And then what?" said sarcastic talking horse, when she had been silent for nearly 2 minutes. "And then he just disappeared." When she came out of the house again, it was dawn. The horse's chestnut coats shone purple in the light. Its ribs seemed to have softened and melted beneath new flesh, sleek pelt. It had also chewed through its tether and walked gracefully to meet her. "How lovely you are," said Garnet Manon. "What took you so long?" said sarcastic Talking Horse. The end.
Oh, Holly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was beautiful and strange and sad and in all the best possible ways. I remember reading it when it first came out. You sold that to Gardner, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Oh man. Ah, so it's our custom here at Story Hour to just chill for a moment and let the story sort of resonate and ring before we move on to the next. So we're going to do that. I certainly have my own private thoughts to sort of resonate around this work. All right, onward. So wonderful to see you again, Holly.
So good to see you too. Really good to see you.
Wole Talabi is an engineer, writer, and editor from Nigeria. His stories have appeared in Asimov's, Lightspeed, FNSF, Clark's World, and several other places. He has edited 3 anthologies: African Futurism 2020, which was nominated, not African Futurism 2020, but African Futurism published in 2020, which was nominated for the Locus Award in 21. Lights Out, Resurrection, published in 2016, and These Words Expose Us, published in 2014. His fiction has been a finalist for multiple awards, including the prestigious Caine Prize in 2018, the Locus Award 2022, the Jim Bain Memorial Award 2022, and the NAMO Award, which he won in 2018 for Best Short Story and 2020 for Best Novella. Wole's work has been translated into Spanish, Norwegian, Chinese, Italian, Bengali, and French. His collection, Incomplete Solutions 2019, is published by Luna Press, and his debut novel, Shigidi, you'll let me know if I did not pronounce that correctly, will be published in fall of 2023. Wole likes scuba diving, elegant equations, and oddly shaped things. He currently lives and works in Malaysia. Wole, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. First of all, wonderful story, Holly. I loved it. 10 out of 10. I have no notes. It was excellent. So today I will be reading a story that was originally published in Asimov. So like you said, Small Galaxy. It's called An Arc of Electric Skin. Some content warnings, mostly around death and dying, and just a difficult life in general. So yeah, I'll begin. I'll be reading from my phone, so excuse me if I pop in and out. An Arc of Electric Skin. For a long time, I wondered what kind of person would volunteer to have their skin exposed to temperatures cycling between the melting point of aluminum and the nighttime surface temperature of mercury, riding a wave of thermal torment that would drive most people insane with pain. Now I know. I fell in love with such a man. He was ungraciously tied to an anti-ionization pole and executed by a 6-man firing squad in front of the dirty gray wall of Kirikiri prison before a hushed crowd of witnesses. I never even got the chance to say goodbye. I was in the vice grip of 3 burly Secret Service officers, tears still streaming down my face, even though I'd been crying for days. His afro was wild and uneven, The white jumpsuit he'd been dressed in was frayed, but clean, and his eyes were still as defiant as they'd been the day he walked into my office at Lagos Teaching Hospital and said with calm and composure that belied all the rage that must have been inside him, "Dr. Gumbi, I read the paper you published with Professor Aliyu, and I want to volunteer." His real name was Akachi Nwosu, but the media called him Shock Absorber because he used to be a roadside mechanic before he met me and taught himself to wield lightning. My people believe names are tied to one's essence and destiny, and they can influence or predict it, a bond to one's Ori. I think Akachi's people have similar beliefs because he told me his name means hand of God. It was appropriate. What else would you call a man whose destiny drove him to find a way to hold on to the raging flow of displaced electrons and bend them to his will? My heart aches because I miss his determined eyes, his hard hands, his smooth skin, his soft voice. But also, it aches because in fragile moments, doubts overwhelm me, and I'm not sure if I ever knew him completely enough to have truly loved him. In the darkest of those moments, when I think about his final deception, I'm not sure if he ever truly loved me either. He graduated from the University of Ibadan with a degree in electrical engineering, during which he had attended guest lectures by my senior research partner, Professor Aliyu. He graduated with a first-class degree and a fascination with electrical systems, despite having to work part-time as an assistant at a mechanic shop, where he also lived because he couldn't afford accommodation. But he couldn't find a job in the crumbling post-oil economy of Nigeria. And so he took what little savings he had and started a small mechanic shop of his own next to Ojota Motor Park. He showed me pictures of it while we lay in each other's arms 2 nights before the procedure. It was little more than a zinc roof over dusty land and a pile of secondhand tools. The profits were not good, but he worked hard. His calloused hands bore witness. He spent hours attending to junky jalopies that were barely roadworthy, but heaven knows he did his best with them. His own mother had died in a bus, just like the ones he frequently serviced, in an accident on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which everyone knew was caused by a contractor cutting corners on what should have been road barriers. An accident he'd barely survived himself, needing 5 months in the hospital to recover and learn to walk again. His father had sold everything he owned and borrowed from family members just to afford the care his son needed. So when Akachi worked on those buses and cars, he told me, he saw the faces of the families that would get into them, hoping to make it to their destinations. And so he worked as hard as he could to make sure they did. He endured every brick the crumbling system threw at him: constant police harassment raids for bribes, aggressive underpaying clients, random changes in government policy that almost always meant he had to pay more for something, thieving and unworthy assistance. All of this under the blistering heat of the Lagos sun, increasing his already high melanin levels, his darkening another physical marker of his endurance. And still he persisted, my Akachi. He had a strong mind. This country happens to all of us, he told me the first night I had asked about his scars. That was his philosophy. It happens to some of us more than others. He eventually saved enough money to move out of the face me, I face you he shared with friends from university and into a self-contained in an almost respectable part of town. He was working his way up the broken system, keeping up with the Nigerian Journal of Electrical and Electronic Applications, and still looking for a job where he could apply the knowledge that had always fascinated him. And then he went to the campaign rally. Ezekwe for president, easy, easy, a new Nigeria. We all remember the slogans, the digitags, the posters. Ngozi Ezekwe announced her candidacy quietly at a small event near her hometown in Oka. But within a few months, she had become the leading opposition candidate. She was a technocrat with a plan, unlike the political vultures circling the federal caucus that we'd become used to. She came in with a clear agenda, an empathetic ear, and grassroots support from the businesses she'd helped survive the economic apocalypse. We all remember the hope, and we all saw what happened. Vision display decks crackled with high-resolution hollow streams of soldiers beating unarmed people in the streets, dragging them into the backs of armored trucks, firing live rounds into defiant crowds, breaking up the opposition rallies and protests. Akachi was one of those taken into custody near the infamous Ojota protest site, where almost 40 were killed. He was beaten and tortured for weeks. The Gusau administration made no secret of what they did, even though the president denied giving the order on international broadcasts. But on the ground, we all knew what it was. We'd seen it before, their regular trademark. It was a show of force to intimidate the opposition and its supporters. We were living in a hostage state. It was during his weeks of torment that something broke in Akachi. To be treated that way by those who were meant to protect and serve you, to know that they could kill you and nothing would happen, it does something to your mind. Pain can clarify things. He told me later that after hours of unrelenting terror and agony, he'd stopped fearing death, that he'd realized he'd been so focused on surviving the system that he'd never, ever truly been alive, and that he was doing nothing but dying slowly the entire time and had been doing so for a long time. He told me that when he was released, he'd resolved to ensure things changed. I wish I had known then exactly what he'd meant. I'm not recruiting test subjects yet, I told him that day in my office, after he explained who he was and what he was talking about. We still have a few iterations to ensure we can manage sensory response. You mean pain? Yes, I told him. Right now, we can only ensure subject survival and prevent long-term tissue damage, but we are still working to limit the impact of extreme temperature microexposures on pain receptors. The body and mind will protest, even under anesthesia. Pain. I can handle pain, he said calmly. I just come back from a session with the visiting council at the African Academy of Sciences to make my 7th application for funding after a week of sleepless nights running calculations, simulations, preparing proposals. The potential for our research was enormous. Even the most conservative members of the council weren't myopic enough to miss the value in being able to use enhanced conductivity in human skin to develop a new category of biomedical devices that could be naturally embedded in the body and controlled using dermal interface circuitry. They just wanted to see more progress before they committed to helping us more. Professor Ali had already designed and tested a prototype device using enhanced conductivity in discarded epithelial extracts, but we needed to show we could make this work in living people. I felt like I was the one holding things back. I was under pressure to make some progress. I should have been more skeptical. I should have asked more questions. I should have told Akachi to wait until we were really ready, but instead, I asked him to fill out a form. It took a few weeks for me to convince Professor Ali to cross what he believed to be a moral line, and for us to perform the preliminary tests and screening processes. We spent much of that time together. Akachi sitting just outside my office, quietly watching me or reading, patiently waiting for another blood or skin or hair sample collection or for another baseline skin conductivity measurement. I never asked him why he never left the hospital in between tests, but I did ask him to join me for dinner once as I was closing for the day. He seemed so focused sitting there, reading an old, battered electrical engineering book. But I don't think I'll ever forget the soft smile that broke across his face when he looked up and the way he said, "Yes, doctor, but please, let me take you to the best buka in Surulere. I hope you're hungry." "I am," I said. I hadn't eaten all day. So we went to get amala and begiri at a makeshift shop down the road. An old lady in a black blouse and Ankara wrapper scooped up the soft lumps of yam flour, loaded them with generous helpings of soup and meat, and we took seats on plastic chairs just behind her. We spoke as we ate. That was the first time we talked about anything other than the experiments, but the conversation flowed naturally, easily. We spoke for hours until the old woman told us she was closing for the day. It wasn't planned, but we went back to my place and we kept talking. He showed me his scars, and I told him about my work. And we kept speaking until we fell asleep together, face to face on my bed, with all our clothes still on. When we woke up in the morning, we laughed, and then we kissed, leaving me lightheaded, like I was still asleep and in a dream. It was only later that a feeling of wrongness settled upon me. He was in some sense my patient. But nothing that happened that day was planned, and sometimes you get caught in a river and you can't do anything but flow. Love can be a strange and sudden thing. 3 days after he'd passed the final screening, I led him into the bioannealing cell I'd designed with Professor Aliyu. He squeezed my hand as he stepped into the black ovoid pod with wires and tubes running out of it like so many umbilical cords. He smiled at me before securing the fiberglass mask over his face. Professor Aliyu was nested comfortably in his wheelchair, monitoring the thermal induction and vacuum pump systems that would rearrange the molecular structure of the melanin in Akachi's skin. Part of me wanted to pull him away, to wait until we had improved the bioannealing procedure to the point where we could do it with less pain, or perhaps to reduce the target conductivity increase from the theoretical limit to a near threshold value, even though I knew that that would only reduce the pain induced by a small fraction and increase the risk of process failure. For sure, if I had known then what he was planning to do, what he'd resolved to do all along, I would have dragged him out of there, but I didn't. So I stepped back and I gave Professor Aliyu the signal to begin. He screamed, but we could not hear him. He screamed for the 3 hours it took to increase the skin conductivity 50 orders of magnitude. I stepped out of the room to cry. I still wonder how he managed to endure it. I still wonder how I could put someone I love through that. I suppose I'll always wonder when it comes to Akachi. It was only a month later that I truly understood why he did it. I saw it in all the high-resolution hollow streams, same as everyone else. Incumbent President Umar Gusau was standing in the back of an electric black Mercedes T-Class pickup truck, flanked by Secret Service men in dark suits and military attachés in camouflage, as he waved to a crowd of paid supporters. Although he was supposed to be resting at home and preparing for his conductivity stability test that day, I saw Akachi on the core vision screen. At first, he was an almost invisible speck in the sea of people. Almost invisible, that is, until he pulled up an umbrella fitted with what I later came to find out was a high-powered laser and fired it silently into the sky, where it formed an ionized column of air, an artificial conduit for electrical discharge. When lightning finally tore down from the sky in a hot, bright streak, he reached up and seized it like a whip made of bright electric death. I gasped audibly, and I didn't even notice that I was spilling my cup of hot Lipton tea onto my desk. He struck down at the presidential procession in a smooth, clear motion. There was a deafening explosion of thunder, a flash of impossibly white light, a scattering of dust and particles and fragments. The holographic displays went dead, and I exhaled deeply, letting out the breath I didn't know I had been holding, and seeing the brown spill that was spreading slowly across my desk. I didn't even bother to try to wipe any of it. My eyes remained glued to the fuzzy, crackling images being transmitted from Abuja. When the hollow streams were reestablished and everything had settled, there were bodies, there was fire, and there was blood. No matter how many times I watch it, a part of me still doesn't believe that the man I loved could cause so much destruction, so much death. I suppose now, in hindsight, I should have known. I should have seen the signs. The frequency with which he quoted the late Ken Saro-Wiwa and Fela Kuti, the way he always averted his eyes when I spoke about the results of his procedure and his future, the calm with which he spoke about his mother's death, the state of the economy, the bribes, the torture, the politicians, the pain, so much pain, a lifetime of pain and struggle. I should have known that he was full and running over. I should have loved him enough to see all of him clearly. More was to come. He went on a rampage throughout Abuja, wielding lightning like raw justice at corrupt politicians, judges, soldiers, police, businessmen, everyone he believed had a hand in making the broken system the way it was. He surrendered 2 terror-filled weeks later, a trail of dead in his wake. During the trial, some in the media started calling him Nigeria's first true-life superhero. That was when they dubbed him Shock Absorber. Others said he was no hero, just another tragic monster the system had created. In the end, none of it mattered. He was quickly found guilty and sentenced to death. I was given the opportunity to say goodbye, to watch him die, by President Ezekwe herself, a woman who wouldn't be where she was without his actions, but who now reluctantly acceded to Christ for his public execution in order to secure her position. It was the law, she'd said to me on the phone, Section 33 of the Constitution, and she could not be seen to interfere in the trial of a man, a terrorist, who had extrajudiciously murdered her predecessors in cold blood. She'd be accused of sponsoring, sympathizing, or spinelessness in matters of upholding the law, and she couldn't start her tenure like that. Even commuting his sentence to life would make her position untenable, she told me as I begged her over the phone to save his life, tears streaming down my puffy face like bitter rain. And so I helplessly watched as camouflage soldiers in tactical masks marched in, took up positions and took aim. He just smiled and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." My Akachi, the hand of God. My people believe that Shango, the Orisha of thunder and lightning, is also the Lord of justice. And he only strikes down those who have offended him, those who have committed offenses against the land and its people, and for whom spilled blood demanded justice. I think Akachi's people believe something similar. Seeing him bound there, I still wasn't sure if what he had done was good or even just, divine or otherwise. But things had been so wrong in the country for so long that perhaps this was what was needed to start a change. Or perhaps he had only started us down a dark and dangerous path filled with even more desperation, more violence. I don't know. I could see he was at peace with himself, and for that, I was glad. But I could not bear to watch the bullets pierce his beautiful black electric skin, the skin I'd caressed and touched tenderly, the skin I'd helped him turn into a weapon. I closed my eyes and waited, holding my breath, until finally I heard the unmistakable sharp cracks of semi-automatic fire. They sounded like judgment, like thunder, like heartbreak. The end.
Oh, man. Let's let that one settle for a second. Well, Laura, we are so lucky that we get to do this every week. My. Wonderful work, Wole. Thank you so much. Hollywood Matter, Wole Talabi, really great work. We hope both of you come back to Story Hour. It's really wonderful to have you. Really just feels like a very special night. I don't know. All right. Next week, we have Gordon B. White, A.M. Mafaz. I want to thank all of you for coming back every week to Story Hour, my fine co-host, Laura Blackwell, and tonight's wonderful readers, Wole Talabi, Hollywood Matter. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everybody out there, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.